If you look at the United States on a map today, it may appear as just one large country stretching across North America. But if you zoom out and look at the world more carefully, you'll realize that American influence goes far beyond its borders. Through military presence, economic power, and global alliances, the United States has built something that many historians describe as a modern empire. Unlike traditional empires of the past, the American empire is not defined only by colonies or territories. Instead, it operates through influence political, cultural, and economic, reaching nearly every corner of the globe. But how did a former group of colonies become one of the most powerful nations in human history? This is the story of the rise of the United States. The origins of the United States begin with European colonization in North America. During the 16th and 17th centuries, European powers such as Britain, France, and Spain established settlements across the continent. Among them, the British colonies along the eastern coast would eventually play the most significant role in shaping the future United States. By the 18th century, 13 British colonies had developed along the Atlantic coastline. These colonies had growing populations, local governments, and thriving economies. However, tensions began to rise between the colonists and the British government, especially over taxation and political representation. The British Parliament imposed taxes on the colonies without giving them a voice in decision-making. This led to the famous slogan, "No taxation without representation." Over time, protests turned into resistance, and resistance eventually turned into revolution. In 1775, war broke out between the colonies and Britain. Just 1 year later, in 1776, the colonies declared their independence, forming a new nation, the United States of America. After years of fighting, the Americans secured victory, establishing themselves as an independent country. However, independence was only the beginning. The newly formed United States quickly began expanding westward, driven by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that Americans were destined to expand across the continent. The nation pushed beyond its original borders. Throughout the 19th century, the United States acquired vast territories. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the size of the country. Later, through war and negotiation, the U.S. gained control of Florida, Texas, California, and much of the American West. This expansion, however, came at a significant cost. Native American populations were displaced from their lands through forced removal and conflict. Events like the Trail of Tears remain some of the darkest chapters in American history. As the country expanded, internal tensions also grew, particularly over the issue of slavery. These tensions eventually led to the American Civil War in 1861. The war divided the nation into two sides, the Union and the Confederacy. After 4 years of brutal conflict, the Union emerged victorious in 1865. Slavery was abolished, and the United States began the long process of rebuilding and redefining itself as a unified nation. By the late 19th century, the United States had transformed into a rapidly industrializing power. Railroads connected the country, factories boosted production, and cities grew at an unprecedented rate. With a strong economy and increasing population, the United States was ready to expand its influence beyond its borders. One of the turning points came in 1898 during the Spanish-American War. In a short but decisive conflict, the United States defeated Spain and gained control of territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This marked the beginning of America's role as an overseas power. Unlike earlier expansion across North America, this new phase extended U.S. influence into the Caribbean and the Pacific. The United States was no longer just a continental nation, it had become a global player. In the early 20th century, America's influence continued to grow, especially during World War I. Although the U.S. initially remained neutral, it eventually joined the war in 1917, helping to tip the balance in favor of the Allies. After the war, the United States emerged as one of the world's leading economic powers. However, it chose not to fully engage in global politics during the interwar period, focusing instead on domestic growth. This changed dramatically during World War II. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States entered the war and played a decisive role in defeating both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. By the end of World War II in 1945, much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins. The United States, however, emerged stronger than ever, with a powerful military, a booming economy, and unmatched global influence. This period marked the true beginning of what many consider the American empire. Through initiatives like the Marshall Plan, the U.S. provided financial aid to rebuild Europe, strengthening alliances and expanding its influence. At the same time, a new global rivalry began: the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union competed for dominance across the world, supporting allies and engaging in conflicts indirectly. Throughout the Cold War, the U.S. established military bases around the globe, formed alliances like NATO, and intervened in conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and elsewhere. Although these conflicts were often controversial, they demonstrated the extent of American global reach. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower. For the first time in modern history, one nation stood above all others in terms of military, economic, and political influence. In the decades that followed, the United States continued to shape global events. From the War on Terror to economic globalization, American policies and culture influenced nations worldwide. Today, the influence of the United States can be seen in nearly every aspect of global life. American technology companies dominate the digital world. Hollywood shapes global entertainment. The US dollar remains a key part of international trade. Despite this power, the idea of an American empire remains debated. Unlike traditional empires, the US does not directly rule most of the territories it influences. Instead, its power lies in networks, partnerships, and global systems. However, critics argue that this form of influence can be just as powerful as direct control. Military interventions, economic pressure, and political influence have all been used to shape outcomes in different regions. In recent years, new challenges have emerged. Rising powers such as China, shifting alliances, and internal divisions within the United States have raised questions about the future of its global dominance. Even so, The legacy of American expansion and influence is undeniable. From a group of colonies to a global superpower, the United States has reshaped the modern world in ways few nations ever have. The story of the American empire is not just about power, it is about growth, conflict, ambition, and transformation. And as history continues to unfold, the next chapter of this story is still being written. Even after becoming the world's only superpower in 1991, the United States did not slow down. Instead, it entered a new phase, one defined not just by military strength, but by technological dominance, cultural influence, and economic globalization. The rise of Silicon Valley transformed the United States into the center of the digital revolution. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, and later Google and Facebook began shaping how people communicate, work, and consume information. The internet, largely driven by American innovation, became one of the most powerful tools of influence in human history. Through this digital expansion, American culture spread faster than ever before. Movies, music, fashion, and even social values reached millions of people across the globe. Hollywood became a symbol of global entertainment, while American brands became household names in countries thousands of miles away. At the same time, the United States strengthened its economic reach through global institutions, organizations like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, where the U.S. held significant influence, played key roles in shaping economic policies around the world. The U.S. dollar remained the backbone of global trade, giving America a unique advantage in international finance. However, this dominance was not without challenges. The early 21st century brought new conflicts and uncertainties following the attacks of September 11, 2001. The United States launched the War on Terror. Military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq aimed to eliminate threats and spread stability, but they also led to long and costly wars. These conflicts raised serious questions about the limits of American power. While the U.S. military remained unmatched, winning wars did not always mean achieving lasting peace. In many regions, instability continued despite years of intervention. At the same time, new global powers began to rise. China, in particular, experienced rapid economic growth and started its Belt and Road Initiative aimed to build infrastructure and strengthen connections across Asia, Africa, and Europe, creating a new network of influence. Russia also re-emerged as a strategic competitor, asserting its presence in global politics and military affairs. These developments signaled that the world was no longer unipolar, but gradually shifting toward a multipolar system. Inside the United States, internal challenges also began to surface: economic inequality, political polarization, and social tensions created divisions within the country. While America remained powerful on the global stage, these internal issues raised concerns about its long-term stability and leadership. Despite these challenges, the United States continued to play a central role in global affairs. Its military bases remained spread across dozens of countries. Its alliances, particularly through NATO, ensured continued influence in Europe and beyond. American universities attracted students from around the world, contributing to its intellectual and cultural leadership. Moreover, innovation continued to drive American power. Advancements in artificial intelligence, space exploration, and biotechnology positioned the United States at the forefront of future industries. Private companies began achieving milestones once reserved for governments, such as launching reusable rockets and planning missions to Mars. In many ways, the American empire evolved rather than declined. It shifted from direct control to indirect influence. Instead of ruling territories, it shaped systems. Instead of conquering land, it dominated ideas, technology, and global networks. Yet, the question remains, can this influence last? History shows that no empire remains dominant forever. From the Roman Empire to the British Empire, all eventually faced decline. The United States, despite its strength, is not immune to the same forces of change. The future of American power will likely depend on how it adapts to a rapidly changing world. Cooperation, innovation, and internal stability may determine whether it continues to lead or gradually shares its position with others. What is certain, however, is that the impact of the United States on the modern world is undeniable. From politics to technology, from culture to economics, its influence has shaped the lives of billions. Whether seen as a force for progress or a symbol of dominance, the American empire remains one of the most significant forces in human history. And as the world continues to evolve, the story of this empire is far from over. The next chapter is still being written not just by governments and leaders, but by people across the globe who are connected more than ever before. So, when we look at the United States today, we are not just looking at a country, we are looking at a system of power that stretches across the entire world. From its humble beginnings as a group of colonies fighting for independence, to becoming the most dominant force of the modern age, the journey of the United States is nothing short of extraordinary. It is a story shaped by ambition, conflict, innovation, and constant transformation. But what makes the American empire truly unique is not just its military strength or economic dominance, it is its ability to influence the world without directly controlling it. Through technology, culture, alliances, and global systems, the United States has built a form of power that is far more complex than the empires of the past. However, no empire in history has remained at the top forever. Today, the United States faces challenges that could shape its future in unpredictable ways. Rising powers like China are challenging its economic and technological dominance. Political divisions within the country continue to grow, and the global balance of power is slowly shifting. The question is no longer how America rose to power. The real question is, can it stay there? Will the United States adapt to a changing world and continue to lead? Or will it follow the path of past empires, gradually ing its dominance to emerging nations? History does not give easy answers. What it does show us, however, is that power is never permanent. It evolves, it shifts, and sometimes it fades. Yet, even if the future brings change, the impact of the United States on the world is already undeniable. From the way we communicate, to the technology we use, to the culture we consume, American influence is deeply woven into modern life. In many ways, The world we live in today has been shaped by the rise of this modern empire. And perhaps that is the most important thing to understand. Because the story of the American Empire is not just about one nation, it is about the world itself. It is about how power grows, how it spreads, and how it transforms everything it touches. I hope you scope history video, like, and share. Thank you very much for your loving comments. See you in the next amazing video.